My parents flew to a royal palace in Italy for my sister's extravagant wedding. I stayed behind in my apartment in California, completely uninvited. At 2 in the morning, my phone lit up with frantic emergency texts and a call from my mother screaming about the Italian police locking them inside the venue. They expected me to fix their financial disaster just like I always did. But this time I made one single phone call that ended their reign of manipulation forever. My name is Natalie, and I am 34 years old. I work as a forensic accountant in San Francisco, and for years I was the designated problem solver for my toxic relatives. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to cut off family members who underestimated your intelligence and treated you like a walking bank account. Trust me, you will want to hear how I handled the ultimate betrayal. It was exactly 2 in the morning on a Tuesday when the ringtone shattered the silence of my bedroom. I had to work early the next day, so I almost ignored it. But the caller ID flashed my mother Cynthia's name. Against my better judgment, I answered. I barely had the phone to my ear before her shrill voice blasted through the speaker. Natalie, you need to wire $350,000 to the palace management right now. She was hyperventilating, and I could hear a chaotic mix of shouting voices, clinking glass, and foreign accents in the background. Do you hear me? The bank declined the final payment for the wedding venue. The estate manager called the Italian police, and they are blocking the massive iron doors. They are not letting anyone leave the property until the bill is settled. I sat up in the dark and turned on my bedside lamp. I felt no panic, just a cold, deep wave of exhaustion. For my entire adult life, my parents, Richard and Cynthia, had favored my younger sister Brittany, treating her like royalty, while expecting me to foot the bill. Brittany was marrying Jamal, a man who constantly bragged about his supposed tech startup wealth. Yet here was my mother screaming at me from Lake Como, Italy, demanding a fortune in the middle of the night. I got out of bed and walked to my kitchen to pour a glass of water. Mom, I am not wiring you a single cent. I kept my voice perfectly level. In case you forgot, I was explicitly uninvited from this magnificent royal wedding. But you are her sister! Cynthia shrieked over the noise of the panicking wedding guests. You are family, and you have to help us. I took a slow sip of water. We established that I was not family 3 months ago. That was when you and Dad told me I would ruin the aesthetic of the wedding photos unless I paid for first-class plane tickets for Jamal's entire extended family. When I refused to drop $50,000 on flights for strangers, you told me I was a selfish, bitter woman and revoked my invitation. So why exactly is the billionaire groom not paying his own venue bill? There was a sudden scuffle on the other end of the line. The sound of my mother crying was replaced by the heavy, angry breathing of my father. Richard snatched the phone. His voice was not panicked like my mother's. It was low, venomous, and dripping with a dark, calculated authority that made my blood run cold. Stop playing games, Natalie, my father growled. The police are threatening to confiscate our passports. Jamal's offshore accounts are temporarily frozen due to an international banking error, and we do not have time for your petty jealousy. You are going to log into your portal and authorize the charge right this second. I leaned against the cool marble of my kitchen counter. Authorize what charge? I do not have a card on file with an Italian palace. My father let out a harsh, cruel laugh that echoed through the receiver. Oh, but you do. You think we would let you ruin your sister's dream wedding just because you wanted to be stubborn. You do not have a choice in this matter, Natalie. The silence in my apartment suddenly felt absolutely suffocating and terrifying. The credit card that just declined at the terminal has your full name on it. He whispered the words with a sickening sense of complete triumph. We used your corporate information to secure the funds yesterday. So if you do not call the bank and clear the fraud alert right now, you are going to jail with us. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, my knuckles turning bone white against the dark granite. You stole my social security number. The words felt heavy and surreal on my tongue. You committed federal identity theft to pay for a wedding I was banned from attending. There is no theft in family, Richard snapped back. His voice was entirely devoid of guilt. Do not be dramatic, Natalie. We simply leverage the excellent credit profile of your little accounting business. You sit in that depressing apartment all day, hoarding your paycheck, while your sister is out there building a real brand. Brittany has hundreds of thousands of followers. She is a lifestyle influencer. She needed a royal palace to secure her sponsorships and brand deals. What do you even need money for? Another boring gray pantsuit for your cubicle. I closed my eyes, taking a deep, slow breath to steady my racing heart. For years, I had played the dutiful daughter. When Dad needed a loan for a new car, I co-signed the paperwork. When Mom wanted a luxury kitchen remodel to impress her country club friends, I emptied my personal savings. They always promised to pay me back, but the money never once materialized. I finally established firm boundaries and stopped enabling them 3 years ago. In return, they branded me the family villain and cut me out of their glamorous events. I am a forensic accountant, Dad, I said, keeping my voice dangerously calm and professional. My entire career is built on tracking financial fraud and corporate embezzlement. Do you have any idea what the federal government will do when they realize the applicant's signature is forged? The credit line is tied directly to my firm. They will not know anything unless you open your mouth, Richard said, his tone shifting from defensive to aggressively demanding. You owe us this, Natalie. We raised you. We put a roof over your head for 18 years. It is about time you paid us back for everything we sacrificed to give you a decent life. Brittany deserves this fairy tale wedding, and Jamal is going to make millions with his tech startup soon anyway. He is a genius. He will pay off the entire balance next week when his investors wire the next round of funding. A sharp, bitter laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. Jamal paying it off. The man who supposedly made a fortune in cryptocurrency but could not even afford his own flight to Italy. You are completely delusional, I told him. I am not authorizing a $350,000 fraudulent charge. I do not care if Jamal promises to pay it back tomorrow. I am not putting my name and my professional license on the line for $250,000 of toxic debt. In the background, I could hear the heavy boots of the Italian authorities pacing across the marble floors of the venue. A man with a thick accent was shouting orders instructing his officers to secure the perimeter. My mother was sobbing uncontrollably, now loudly wailing to anyone who would listen about how she was going to spend her twilight years rotting in a foreign prison cell. Then you better prepare to lose everything, Richard snarled. Because if you do not call Chase Bank in the next 5 minutes and tell them the charge is entirely legitimate, the venue manager is pressing criminal charges. We will tell the police you set up the card for us as a surprise wedding gift and then maliciously canceled it at the last minute just to humiliate us. We will drag you into this international mess. My stomach twisted violently. They were cornered animals and they were entirely willing to destroy my life to save their own skin. And think about your precious credit score, Natalie, he continued, his voice dripping with venomous malice. That perfect 800 you are always bragging about. If we default on this card because you refuse to clear the fraud alert, the massive debt goes straight to your social security number. Your credit profile will be completely ruined. You will never get a mortgage for a house. Your firm will go under. Your corporate clients will drop you the second they see a massive defaulted overseas debt on your background check. He thought he had me checkmated. He thought the threat of financial ruin would break my resolve just like it always did when I was a naive teenager. He expected me to crumble, to cry, to beg for a compromise. Instead, I felt an unfamiliar sense of absolute clarity wash over me. The fear evaporated. In its place was a cold, calculating fury. They had crossed the final line. This was no longer just toxic family dynamics. This was a felony. Are you done? I asked, my voice eerily quiet. Call the bank, Richard barked. Before I could say another word, a new voice pierced through the phone. Natalie. How could you do this to me? Brittany wailed. Her sobs were loud, theatrical, and entirely devoid of genuine distress. You are ruining my entire aesthetic. Do you know how embarrassing this is? Jamal is standing right here, and his family is watching the Italian police treat us like common criminals. I listened to my 28-year-old sister throw a toddler-level tantrum. There was no apology for the fact that our father had just confessed to a federal crime. There was no acknowledgement of the massive legal risk they had forced onto my shoulders. To Brittany, the only actual crime committed tonight was that I was not playing my assigned role as the family ATM. She continued her tirade, her voice echoing off the stone walls of whatever palatial hallway she was hiding in. The videographer is charging us by the hour, Natalie. We were supposed to be filming our grand exit under a canopy of sparklers. Now the sparklers are sitting in boxes because the venue manager refuses to light them until the bill is paid. You are literally destroying the most important night of my life because you are too cheap to help your own flesh and blood. My followers are waiting for the live stream. I promised them an exclusive look at the royal reception. If I do not post in the next hour, my engagement metrics will plummet. Do you have any idea how hard I worked to secure the sponsored champagne for this event? I stood in my quiet kitchen in California, listening to a grown woman cry over engagement metrics while authorities were preparing to detain our parents. It was a spectacular display of absolute delusion. My parents had spent decades cultivating this exact behavior. They had taught Brittany that the world revolved around her aesthetic desires, and that my sole purpose in life was to pave her way with my hard-earned money. I pressed the phone harder against my ear. Brittany, do you understand that Dad committed identity theft? He used my social security number to open a business line of credit. If I authorize this, I am complicit in fraud. I do not care about your stupid credit score, Brittany shrieked, cutting me off completely. You are always obsessing over spreadsheets and boring rules. This is my wedding. You should be honored that Dad used your company name. It is the only exciting thing your firm has ever been involved in. Jamal and I are supposed to leave for our Maldives honeymoon in 6 hours. Our first-class flights and the overwater bungalow are waiting. But now Jamal is incredibly stressed and my makeup is ruined. She paused to let out a dramatic gasp for air before delivering her final demand. And you know what, Natalie? You owe me an apology for this ridiculous stress. When you call the bank to fix the card, you need to have them authorize an extra $50,000. We need cash for the honeymoon excursions and to tip the venue staff for the inconvenience. Consider it your wedding gift to us, since you were too stubborn to buy our flights in the first place. You need to make this right immediately, or I am never speaking to you again. I did not say a word. I let the heavy silence stretch across the transatlantic connection. On the other end of the line, the chaotic background noise seemed to quiet down slightly. My family interpreted my silence as surrender. They thought they had won the battle. They thought the combined weight of my father's aggressive threats and my sister's hysterical demands had finally crushed my resistance. I could hear my mother whispering in the background, telling Brittany to calm down, because I was probably logging into my banking app right now. My father muttered something about how I always needed a firm hand to remind me of my place in the family hierarchy. They were entirely wrong. I was not breaking down. I was not crying out of guilt. And I was certainly not calling the bank to authorize their fraudulent spending spree. Instead, I reached out and opened my work laptop. The screen illuminated the dark kitchen, casting a cool blue glow across my face. I bypassed my standard personal accounts and booted up my secure corporate VPN. I logged directly into my forensic accounting databases. These were the high-level encrypted servers I used to track down hidden assets for my corporate clients and investigate international financial fraud. If Jamal was such a wealthy tech genius with millions in offshore crypto staking, I wanted to see it with my own eyes. I wanted to see exactly who my golden child sister was actually marrying. The software I used was not available to the general public. It pulled data from international tax registries, property deeds, court filings, and encrypted credit bureaus. I needed his exact date of birth, which I remembered from a pretentious save-the-date card Brittany had mailed me months ago. I entered his full legal name and his birth date into the Global Asset Tracking Portal. I hovered my finger over the Enter key. I was ready to dismantle the illusion piece by piece. I hit search. The loading icon spun on my screen, diving deep into encrypted financial servers, while the algorithm compiled Jamal's actual net worth. I picked my phone back up. The silence on their end was heavy with expectation. They genuinely believed I was currently entering my banking passwords to save them. "I am not doing it," I said, my voice slicing through the static of the international connection. "What do you mean you are not doing it?" my father demanded. "I mean exactly what I said. I am a licensed forensic accountant. I work alongside federal auditors and corporate legal teams. If I call the bank and authorize a $350,000 charge on a business credit card that was opened fraudulently using my stolen social security number, I become legally complicit. I become an accessory to wire fraud and identity theft. I would lose my certified public accountant license. I would face federal prosecution. I am not going to federal prison because you wanted to drink vintage champagne in an Italian castle." My mother snatched the phone away from my father. Her voice was no longer panicked or weeping. It had hardened into something ugly and vicious. "If you do not make this payment, Natalie, I will make sure you lose that precious career anyway." I raised an eyebrow, staring at the loading bar on my computer monitor. "Is that a threat, Mom?" "It is a promise," Cynthia hissed. "You think you are so untouchable in your fancy San Francisco high-rise. If you let us get arrested tonight, I will personally destroy your professional reputation. I will call the senior partners at your accounting firm. I will find every single one of your corporate clients on LinkedIn, and I will message them directly. I will tell them you are a heartless, abusive daughter who abandoned her family in a foreign country to rot in jail. I will tell them you are financially abusive and mentally unstable. Let us see how many million-dollar accounts you manage when the entire industry thinks you are a sociopath who left her own sister stranded." The sheer audacity of her threat was staggering. My mother was willing to launch a full-scale defamation campaign against her own daughter to protect her own ego. She was weaponizing my career, the very career she mocked and belittled, to force my compliance. "You can call whoever you want," I replied, keeping my tone deadpan. "My firm conducts extensive background checks on all employees. They know exactly who I am, and they know my financial records are spotless. When they find out my parents committed identity theft, they will send a corporate security team to help me press charges, so please, Mom, be my guest. Call my boss." A string of frantic curses erupted from Brittany in the background. She was crying so hard she was hiccuping, demanding that somebody just fix the situation before the police officers lost their patience. I could hear the heavy thud of the venue doors being locked shut by the Italian authorities. Then the chaotic background noise was suddenly muffled. Someone had taken the phone and stepped away from the screaming women. When the new voice spoke, it was smooth, calm, and dripping with condescension. It was Jamal. "Listen, sis," Jamal said, using a nickname that made my skin crawl. "Let us all just take a deep breath and look at this logically. There is no need for everyone to get so emotional over a temporary cash flow issue." I stared at the screen. The search results were finalizing. "Temporary cash flow issue?" I repeated. "Exactly," Jamal purred, leaning into his fake tech billionaire persona. "You know how it is with decentralized finance, sis. The liquidity pools are locked until the next smart contract executes. It is just standard protocol, but the Italian police do not understand crypto staking, so here is what we are going to do. You just float the cash for the weekend to get these cops off our backs. Clear the card and let the venue get paid. My main trust fund unlocks on Monday morning Pacific Standard Time. When it hits, I will wire you $500,000 for the trouble. Consider the extra $150,000 an apology for the late-night wake-up call. We are all family here, so let us just handle this like adults." I stared at my laptop screen as the final financial report rendered in front of me. The data on my new brother-in-law was completely unencrypted and laid out in black and white. The data on my new brother-in-law was completely unencrypted and laid out in black and white. While I read the shocking truth on my screen, Jamal continued talking. He was clearly trying to assert his dominance and play the alpha male, assuming I was just some naive woman he could easily intimidate with financial jargon. "Look, Natalie, I know you are used to the slow-paced world of traditional corporate accounting, he said, his tone thick with unearned arrogance. You deal with payroll and spreadsheets. That is cute. But you have to understand that high net worth individuals like me operate differently. My capital is currently deployed in a highly sophisticated Web3 ecosystem. We are talking about decentralized blockchain architecture and algorithmic staking. My fiat currency is temporarily locked in offshore liquidity pools to maximize yield before our next Series A funding round. He let out a soft, condescending chuckle. You see, the wealthy do not keep liquid cash sitting in a checking account like average working-class employees. We leverage our assets. We utilize debt as a tool. The problem tonight is simply a geographical restriction on my digital wallets. My wealth manager in Dubai is currently asleep, so I cannot authorize the manual override. I need you to step up and act like a team player for the family. I rested my chin on my hand, staring blankly at the glowing monitor. The sheer volume of buzzwords he was stringing together was almost comical. He sounded like a man who had memorized a cryptocurrency podcast, but had no actual idea how global finance worked. So let me get this straight, Jamal, I said, keeping my voice perfectly flat. You are a tech visionary with millions of dollars in offshore accounts. You are securing massive venture capital funding and generating explosive yields on your decentralized assets. Exactly, Jamal replied, sounding incredibly smug. He clearly thought I was buying into his ridiculous illusion. That is why this venue bill is just a tiny administrative hiccup. It is pennies to me. Right, I said. I scrolled down the page on my forensic software, opening his historical banking profile. It is a glaring contradiction, Jamal, I said, my tone analytical and cold. If this $350,000 bill is just pennies to you, why exactly did my 60-year-old father have to commit a federal felony to pay for your wedding? There was a brief stuttering silence on the other end of the line. If you are swimming in angel investor cash, why could you not pay for your own family to fly out to Italy? I pressed, refusing to give him an inch to breathe. Why are you standing in a rented Italian palace begging your wife's sister to float you cash in the middle of the night? If you are a visionary CEO, why did my mother have to finance your rehearsal dinner on her personal credit card last night? Why is a so-called crypto millionaire relying on the credit score of a woman he claims just does cute little spreadsheets in a cubicle? You just do not get it. Jamal snapped, his smooth alpha male facade cracking instantly under basic logical scrutiny. My money is tied up. It is a complex international banking delay. The Italian banks are notoriously hostile to blockchain assets. I have a massive trust fund unlocking on Monday. I already told you I will pay you back with heavy interest. You just need to stop being so paranoid and push the authorization through before the police escalate this. My parents immediately chimed in from the background, eager to defend the golden son-in-law. Do not speak to him like that, Natalie, my mother scolded. Jamal is going to be incredibly wealthy. He is on the cover of startup magazines. You are just trying to humiliate him because you are intimidated by his success. You have always been jealous of anyone doing better than you. He is a visionary, Richard barked, his voice echoing loudly. You are a glorified calculator, Natalie. Do what he says and clear the card. We are not going to let your petty traditional finance mindset ruin a multi-million-dollar network of connections. Jamal has investors at this wedding who cannot be detained by local authorities. I blocked out their frantic screaming and focused entirely on the undeniable data populating my screen. The forensic search had pulled his entire legal and financial footprint spanning the last decade. There were no offshore accounts. There was no trust fund waiting to unlock on Monday. There were no venture capital firms backing him. Instead, I was looking at a barren wasteland of rejected credit applications, defaulted payday loans, and a mountain of unpaid civil judgments. My parents had sold their souls and risked federal prison for a man whose entire existence was a carefully curated Instagram illusion. He was nothing but a grifter preying on my sister's desperate need for social media validation. I took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make Jamal sweat. When I finally spoke, my voice was razor sharp. That is an incredibly fascinating story about your offshore liquidity pools, Jamal. I hit the enter key on my keyboard, expanding the legal documents section of his background report. But that is funny, because looking at your federal background check right now, I do not see any Web3 tech startups or trust funds. Let us talk about the company registered to your name in Nevada. The line was dead silent. I could practically hear the gears grinding in Jamal's head as he tried to figure out how I knew about his Nevada shell company. But I did not give him a single second to spin another lie. I leaned closer to my monitor, reading the public court documents verbatim. Apex Solutions, LLC. Registered 3 years ago in Las Vegas, Nevada. That sounds like a cutting-edge tech startup, right? Except the filing classifies it as a retail arbitrage business. You were drop-shipping cheap electronics from overseas, Jamal, and you were not even successful at it. The business license was revoked for failure to pay basic state filing fees. What is she talking about, Jamal? My father demanded. His voice was no longer arrogant. It was laced with a sudden creeping panic. She is making it up, Brittany yelled. Her voice echoed loudly in the palatial Italian hallway. She is just trying to embarrass us. Hang up the phone, Jamal. Do not listen to her. I ignored my sister and kept reading the undeniable facts. According to the United States Bankruptcy Court District of Nevada, you filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy 22 months ago. You claimed exactly $0 in liquid assets. You discharged over $90,000 in personal credit card debt and unpaid business loans. You do not have a trust fund, Jamal. You do not have offshore liquidity pools waiting to unlock on Monday morning. You have a legally mandated financial wipeout. Jamal, say something, Richard ordered. The heavy authority in his voice was completely gone, replaced by the frantic tone of a man watching his life flash before his eyes. Tell her she is looking at the wrong file. Tell her it is a mistake. But Jamal did not say a word. The smooth, confident alpha male from 2 minutes ago had completely vanished. All I heard was the ragged, shallow sound of his breathing through the phone speaker. I kept scrolling down the forensic report, tearing down the rest of his pathetic illusion piece by piece. Let us look at your current assets, Jamal. Your permanent residence is listed as an apartment complex in Atlanta, Georgia. But there is an active eviction judgment against you from 4 months ago for non-payment of rent. You were kicked out by the sheriff. Is that why you were so eager to move into Brittany's luxury condo in Los Angeles the moment you two met? You just needed a place to sleep. Stop it, Brittany shrieked. You are a jealous liar, Natalie. Jamal owns a penthouse. I have seen the pictures on his Instagram. He wears designer suits. You saw pictures of an Airbnb he rented for a weekend, Brittany. I corrected her, my voice steady and unyielding. The suits are rented. And what about that beautiful matte black sports car he drives around California? The one he told you he bought with his first round of venture capital funding. The vehicle identification number links directly to a high-interest subprime lease agreement. And guess what? The lender has an active repossession order out on it. As we speak, a tow truck driver is actively scanning license plates in Los Angeles, looking for that car to drag it back to the dealership lot. The silence that followed on the other end of the line was absolute. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a massive, devastating truth crashing down on arrogant people. In the background, I could hear the Italian police officers speaking sharply to the venue manager, their patience clearly running out. The reality of the situation was terrifyingly clear. My mother let out a strange, strangled gasp. It sounded like she could not get enough air into her lungs. Richard Jamal, she choked out. Her voice was trembling so hard I could barely understand her. Tell me this is not true. Tell me you did not let me pay for your rehearsal dinner with my personal retirement savings while you are facing eviction. Jamal finally spoke, but his voice was completely unrecognizable. It was thin, weak, and trembling with fear. Mr. Richard, I can explain everything. The market took a sudden downturn and my partners backed out of a crucial deal. I just needed a little time to restructure my portfolio. I swear the money is coming. He was still trying to use corporate buzzwords, but the confidence was entirely gone. He sounded like exactly what he was. a desperate cornered con artist who had just been completely exposed. Brittany erupted into a fit of pure hysteria. "You are lying, Natalie. You hacked into some fake website just to ruin my wedding. You have always been jealous of me. You are just bitter because no man wants to marry a boring accountant. Jamal is a millionaire," but her screams meant nothing. Jamal's terrified inability to string together a coherent defense told my parents everything they needed to know. They were standing in a foreign country surrounded by angry police officers, and they had just realized the billionaire groom was completely, utterly penniless. The silence shattered like glass as Richard exploded. "Are you broke, Jamal?" His question ripped through the phone speaker, carrying a raw, sickening desperation. "Look me in the eye and tell me my older daughter is lying. Tell me you did not file for bankruptcy while wearing a rented tuxedo." Jamal stammered uselessly. His voice was a high-pitched whine completely stripped of its former alpha male arrogance. "Mr. Richard, you have to understand how the system works. The venture capital world is incredibly volatile right now. I was simply protecting my assets from predatory lenders. It was a strategic corporate restructure, not a personal failure." Richard let out a guttural sound of pure, unadulterated rage. "Protecting what assets? She just read your eviction notice aloud over the phone. You do not even own a car. You let me steal my own daughter's social security number to pay for your extravagant destination wedding. You let me commit a federal crime while you had absolutely nothing to your name." Brittany finally found her voice. It was trembling and small. "Jamal, is she telling the truth? Do you really not have a trust fund? Are we really not going to the Maldives tomorrow?" Jamal immediately pivoted back to his favorite survival tactic. He resorted to aggressive gaslighting. He grabbed Brittany by the shoulders, and I could hear the rustle of her heavy silk wedding dress through the receiver. "Baby, listen to me right now. You know your sister is sick. She works with computers all day in a dark room. She knows how to manipulate data and forge digital documents. She hates that you are beautiful, and she hates that you are happy. She hacked into some public database and altered the court records just to frame me. She wants to ruin our perfect day." It was a desperate, pathetic lie. Any rational human being would have laughed in his face. A forensic accountant does not magically hack a federal bankruptcy court server in the middle of the night just to ruin a wedding. But Brittany wanted to believe it so badly. Her entire identity was wrapped up in being the wealthy influencer wife. She could not process the reality of marrying a homeless grifter. "You forged this, Natalie," she screamed at the phone, her voice echoing wildly. "You are trying to ruin my life because you are a miserable spinster. You have always been insanely jealous of me and Jamal." Before I could even begin to dismantle his ridiculous hacking excuse, a heavy set of wooden double doors slammed open in the background. The chaotic family argument was instantly silenced by the booming, authoritative voice of the Italian palace manager. "Basta," he shouted. "Enough of this nonsense." His heavy leather boots echoed loudly against the marble floors, followed closely by the synchronized heavy footsteps of several armed police officers. The authorities had completely run out of patience. "I have given you every single opportunity to resolve this matter quietly," the manager barked in heavily accented broken English. "The American bank has officially confirmed the credit card is fraudulent. You have provided no alternative method of payment. You are actively stealing from this historical estate." The unmistakable metallic clink of handcuffs being unclipped from a police belt echoed sharply through the phone. It was a terrifying, sobering sound. "You have exactly 10 minutes," the manager announced, his voice devoid of any sympathy. 10 minutes to produce the $350,000. If the funds are not secured, the police will place every single one of you in handcuffs. You will be escorted to the provincial jail for the night, and your passports will be seized by the magistrate. The wedding is officially over." Total panic descended upon my family. Brittany began to hyperventilate, letting out short, breathless sobs as the reality of a foreign prison cell finally broke through her delusions. Richard started pleading loudly with the officers, begging for access to an embassy phone and promising he was a respected American businessman. I sat perfectly still in my quiet apartment in California, sipping my water. I waited for the inevitable moment they would realize they had absolutely no way out. The con artist they worshipped could not save them. The only person who could save them was the daughter they had emotionally abused and discarded. I expected a profound apology. I expected them to beg for my forgiveness. I expected my mother to finally turn on Jamal and tear him apart for deceiving her precious golden child. But toxic families do not operate on logic or accountability. They operate on a twisted sense of shared delusion and scapegoating. The rustling of the phone indicated someone had violently snatched it from Richard. It was Cynthia. Her breathing was ragged and her voice was filled with a terrifying, irrational fury. Instead of turning her rage toward the fake billionaire who had conned them all, my mother aimed her venom directly at me. "This is entirely your fault." Natalie Cynthia screamed, her voice cracking with hysterical rage. "If you had just kept your mouth shut and authorized the card, we could have paid the venue. We could have avoided the police completely. We could have dealt with Jamal privately when we got back to America. You brought this public shame on us on purpose. You have to fix this right now." I listened to my mother scream through the speaker, trying to process the absolute insanity of her logic. She had just discovered that her precious son-in-law was a bankrupt fraud facing eviction. She had just learned that every single dime he claimed to have was a lie. Yet somehow in her twisted mind, I was the villain for refusing to fund the scam. She did not care that Jamal was a grifter. She only cared that I had exposed the grift in front of the Italian police and ruined their wealthy facade. "Mom, are you listening to yourself?" I asked, my voice laced with absolute disbelief. "You want me to commit federal wire fraud to protect a man who just lied to your face? You want to pretend he is a millionaire just so you do not look bad in front of the wedding guests?" "Yes," Cynthia shrieked without a single ounce of hesitation. "That is exactly what family does. We protect our image. Do you know who is out in that courtyard right now? There are local politicians out there. There are country club presidents from back home. If we are hauled out of here in handcuffs, we will be the laughingstock of our entire social circle in California. We can deal with Jamal and his financial issues later. Right now, we need to survive tonight. You have to clear that card." My father grabbed the phone back, his heavy breathing echoing over the line. "Your mother is right, Natalie. This is about preserving our legacy. We are not going to let this little hiccup destroy years of careful social networking. You are going to authorize the charge and we are going to walk out of this palace with our heads held high." I squeezed my eyes shut, feeling a sharp headache forming behind my temples. It was a terrifyingly familiar script. They were demanding that I sacrifice my own future to fund Brittany's lavish lifestyle. "This is exactly what you did to me when I was 18 years old," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous, quiet tone. "You are doing the exact same thing." "Do not bring up the past," Richard barked aggressively. "This is an international emergency. It is the exact same emergency," I shot back, refusing to be silenced. "Do you remember the week before my high school graduation? I had just been accepted into a top-tier accounting program. I asked you for the login to my college savings account, the one my grandparents set up for me. And what did you tell me, Dad?" Richard scoffed loudly. "I told you that family resources had to be reallocated. It was a necessary financial decision." "Reallocated," I repeated, the sterile word tasting like ash in my mouth. "You drained $40,000 from my college fund to pay for Brittany's extravagant Sweet 16 party. You rented a yacht in the marina. You hired a celebrity DJ. You spent my entire educational future so Brittany could take pictures with a customized ice sculpture. And when I cried and begged you to leave me enough for my first semester tuition, what did you tell me to do? You told me to take out high-interest student loans for the good of the family. You told me to go into crippling debt so my little sister could look rich on the internet." Brittany scoffed in the background, her voice dripping with venom. "Oh my God, are you really still crying about that stupid college fund? I was turning 16, Natalie. It was a massive milestone. You can always get federal student loans, but you only turn 16 once. You are so incredibly selfish, holding on to a grudge for over a decade." "I am not holding a grudge, Brittany," I said smoothly. "I am establishing a pattern. You and our parents have a pathological need to project wealth you do not possess, and you constantly expect me to be the sacrificial lamb that pays for it. But the difference between me at 18 and me at 34 is that I am no longer financially dependent on any of you. I do not have to take out loans for you anymore. And I certainly do not have to authorize a fraudulent credit card to keep you out of a foreign jail cell. The line went dangerously quiet. I could hear the Italian police officers in the background speaking rapidly into their radios. Their 10-minute deadline was rapidly approaching. The illusion was crumbling and my parents were completely out of options. Richard's breathing was heavy and ragged over the speaker. The desperate panic in his voice was suddenly replaced by a cold, calculating cruelty. He thought he still had one final trump card left to play. He thought he possessed the ultimate leverage to break my boundaries and force my compliance. You are going to authorize that card, Natalie. Richard sneered, his voice echoing with absolute malicious authority. You are going to call the bank right now and clear the fraud alert. Or we are selling the Newport Beach house tomorrow morning. We will liquidate the property, pay off the venue ourselves, and cut you out of the will completely. You will not see a single dime of inheritance. You will be dead to us. I listened to the hollow threat echoing across the transatlantic line. My father genuinely believed he had just dropped the ultimate trump card. He thought the promise of a future inheritance was the heavy iron chain he could use to drag me back into absolute submission. The Newport Beach house was his absolute pride and joy. It was a sprawling 4-bedroom coastal property overlooking the Pacific Ocean, perfectly manicured, heavily photographed, and constantly flaunted at their prestigious country club. To my parents, that house was the ultimate symbol of their superiority and financial success. Are you listening to me, Natalie? Richard barked, his voice laced with aggressive, desperate authority. I have my luxury real estate agent on speed dial right now. The housing market in Southern California is incredibly hot this season. That property is worth at least $2.2 million easily. We can list it by tomorrow morning and have an all-cash buyer lined up by the end of the week. We will pay off this ridiculous Italian venue bill out of pocket to save Jamal the hassle. And then your mother and I are going to take the rest of the equity and enjoy our golden years. He was breathing heavily, practically spitting the words into the receiver. We will buy a luxury penthouse in Miami. We will travel the world with Brittany and her new husband. And we will make sure our lawyers draft a new ironclad will the second we land back in America. You will be legally and permanently disinherited. Cynthia chimed in, her voice trembling with a sickening mixture of fear and malicious excitement. We will leave every single remaining asset to your sister. You will get absolutely nothing. Not a single piece of jewelry, not a single antique, not a single dollar of the family estate. You will be completely erased from this family tree, all because you were too selfish and stubborn to make one simple phone call to your credit card company. Another loud, authoritative shout in Italian echoed in the background. The heavy metallic clinking of handcuffs grew louder. The venue manager was officially done waiting. Time is up, Richard yelled, pure frantic panic bleeding back into his voice. The police officers are physically stepping toward us. I need your verbal confirmation right now, Natalie. Say it out loud on this recorded line. Say you are authorizing the $350,000 charge so I can put you on speakerphone for the palace manager and the bank. Say it right now, or you lose the family house forever. It was a brilliant masterclass in emotional manipulation. For my entire 34 years of life, this was the exact playbook they relied on to keep me in line. Whenever I tried to establish a basic human boundary, they would immediately threaten my future security. They would dangle the promise of the family estate over my head, forcing me to endure their constant disrespect and finance their wild delusions just to stay in their good graces. They expected me to panic. They expected me to frantically apologize, break down crying, and beg them not to cut me out of the will. But I did not panic. I did not apologize. Instead, a sound escaped my throat that I had not made in years. It started as a low, quiet chuckle, and quickly blossomed into a full, loud, genuine laugh. It was a cold, chilling laugh that reverberated through the quiet, empty walls of my California apartment. It was the absolute sound of a woman who had just realized the terrifying monster under her bed was nothing but a pathetic, fragile shadow. "What is so funny?" Brittany shrieked, her voice cracking with pure hysteria. "We are literally about to be arrested and thrown into a foreign jail, and you are laughing like a psychopath. You are completely sick, Natalie. You need psychiatric help." I took a slow, deep breath, bringing my laughter down to a quiet, highly amused smile. I rested my elbows on the cool granite kitchen counter, staring out my window at the distant glowing city lights of San Francisco. "Oh, Dad, I am not laughing because I am sick. I am laughing because your brilliant master plan has a massive, fatal flaw." "What flaw?" Richard demanded, his voice dropping to a cautious, defensive growl. He hated when he did not have the upper hand. "The house is worth over $2 million. I know exactly what the market value is. I check the real estate listings every single week. The market value is perfectly accurate," I replied, my voice dripping with cold, analytical precision. "It is a beautiful property, in a highly desirable zip code, but you are missing a very crucial detail in your grand liquidation strategy. Sell the house." I paused, letting the heavy silence build across the thousands of miles separating us. "Richard, how exactly do you plan to sell a house that you do not even own?" "What are you talking about?" Richard scoffed, but I could hear the sudden tremor of uncertainty creeping into his voice. "Of course I own the house. My name is on the deed. I bought that property 20 years ago. You have lost your mind, Natalie. You are trying to bluff your way out of this, and it is pathetic." "I have an incredibly sharp memory, Dad," I replied calmly, walking away from my kitchen counter to look out the window, especially when it comes to financial transactions involving my own money. "You are right about one thing. You did buy that house 20 years ago. But you seem to have completely forgotten about a very specific event that took place exactly 3 years and 2 months ago. Do you remember the minor tax issue you ran into with the federal government?" The line went dead silent. Even my mother stopped her frantic sobbing in the background. I could hear the distinct sound of the Italian police radios crackling, filling the quiet void. "I am talking about the time the Internal Revenue Service audited your so-called brilliant investment portfolio." I continued, keeping my tone bright and almost conversational. "You know, the time they discovered you had been massively underreporting your income for years to maintain your wealthy country club lifestyle. They placed a $150,000 federal tax lien on all of your assets. They were ready to seize your bank accounts, and they were actively preparing a criminal case for tax evasion. You were staring down the barrel of a federal prison sentence. That was a simple misunderstanding." Richard snapped, his voice defensive and incredibly tight. "My former accountant made a massive clerical error, and we resolved it privately." "We did not resolve it, Dad," I corrected him sharply, my voice echoing in my quiet apartment. "I resolved it. You showed up at my front door in tears at midnight, begging me to liquidate my personal investment accounts to bail you out. You told me the IRS was going to take the Newport Beach house and leave you and Mom completely homeless. You told me you would be socially ruined, and that Brittany would be so embarrassed she would have to drop out of her expensive private university. You demanded I fix your mess, because according to you, that is exactly what family does. So you wrote me a check," Richard countered, trying desperately to regain his dominant footing. "It was a family loan. I am going to pay you back with heavy interest when we sell the house tomorrow morning." "So what is your point, Natalie?" "My point is that I am a certified forensic accountant," I said slowly, articulating every single syllable. "I do not hand out six-figure unsecured loans to high-risk individuals who are actively being investigated for tax fraud. Not even if those individuals are my parents. When I agreed to pay off your $150,000 IRS lien, I told you I required ironclad collateral to secure the transaction. I brought a stack of legal documents to the house for you and Mom to sign." "It was standard loan paperwork," Richard argued, but his breathing was growing increasingly rapid. "It was just a basic promissory note for the family records." "Are you entirely sure about that?" I asked, leaning back against my living room wall. Because from what I recall, you were so terrified of the federal agents auditing you that you did not even bother to read a single page of the thick paperwork I placed in front of you on the dining room table. You just grabbed your expensive fountain pen and eagerly signed every single signature line I pointed to. You were so intensely relieved that your stupid, boring daughter was fixing your financial disaster again that you did not even ask a single question. Natalie, what did you make him sign? Cynthia whispered. Her voice sounded like it was being violently squeezed through a tight fist. I made him sign a quitclaim deed, Mom, I answered, my voice ringing out clearly over the transatlantic line. In the state of California, a quitclaim deed immediately transfers all legal ownership interest of a property from one party to another. I did not give you a family loan to pay off your federal tax evasion penalties. I bought the Newport Beach house from you for exactly $150,000. And because you were so desperate to hide your financial failure from your rich friends, you signed away the entire $2 million property without a second thought. No, Richard bellowed. The sound was raw and guttural, echoing violently off the stone palace walls. That is completely illegal. You tricked me. That is my house. You manipulated the paperwork. It is completely legal and securely filed with the county clerk, I replied, refusing to let his explosive anger rattle me. You legally transferred the title to a private limited liability company, a company that I fully own and operate. You cannot call a real estate agent tomorrow morning and sell my property, Dad. You have absolutely zero equity to your name. You are totally and completely broke. The absolute finality of my words hung in the air, crushing the last remaining ounce of their manufactured reality. There was no more blustering. There were no more aggressive threats about inheritance or social status. For the first time in my entire life, my father had absolutely nothing to say. For decades, Richard had operated under the assumption that he was the smartest man in the room. He believed he could outsmart the federal government, outsmart his business partners, and endlessly manipulate his own daughter. Discovering that I had quietly secured the title to the Newport Beach house 3 years ago while he was blinded by his own legal terror completely destroyed his ego. The realization set in with the crushing weight of a concrete wall. They had absolutely no money. They had an angry Italian police force standing inches away from them. Their billionaire son-in-law was a homeless fraud facing eviction. And the $1 million safety net they thought they could use to bully me into submission belonged entirely to me. Cynthia stopped her theatrical sobbing. It was instantly replaced by the terrifying, ragged sound of genuine hyperventilation. She was gasping for air like a woman who had just stepped off a ledge, realizing there was no ground beneath her. Richard let out a sound that I had never heard before. It was a choked, agonizing gasp that shattered his arrogant facade completely. My domineering father, the man who had ruled our family through fear, financial manipulation, and cruel ultimatums, broke down into a loud, pathetic sob. Natalie, please! His voice was practically unrecognizable, trembling violently with unadulterated terror. You cannot do this to us. You cannot leave us here. I am a 60-year-old man. I cannot survive in an Italian prison cell. I have a heart condition. Please, I am begging you on my hands and knees. The transition was incredibly jarring. Just 2 minutes ago, he was aggressively ordering me to commit federal wire fraud and threatening to leave me penniless. Now he was weeping openly over the phone, abandoning every single shred of his pride in front of hundreds of wedding guests. I listened to the chaos erupting in the background. The heavy synchronized footsteps of the carabinieri echoed loudly against the marble floors. The venue manager was shouting orders in rapid Italian, instructing the officers to secure the perimeter. I could hear the distinct sound of expensive glassware shattering on the stone floor as guests panicked and tried to flee the reception area. The beautiful string quartet that had been playing classical music earlier had been replaced by the chaotic shouting of local law enforcement. "Put your hands behind your back!" a stern voice shouted in broken English. The sharp, metallic ratcheting sound of handcuffs being tightened around someone's wrists pierced through the speaker. "They are arresting the groomsmen!" Cynthia wailed, her voice thick with sheer panic. Natalie, they are putting handcuffs on your uncle. They are taking our passports. Please help us. You are the only one who can fix this. You have always fixed everything for us. Where is your brilliant son-in-law, Mom? I asked, keeping my voice utterly devoid of sympathy. Why is Jamal not using his massive network of venture capitalists to pay the venue manager? He tried to run away, Cynthia sobbed hysterically. The moment the police stepped forward, Jamal dropped his champagne glass and tried to sprint out the back doors of the courtyard. The private security guards tackled him into the gravel driveway. He is crying on the ground right now, telling the police he has no idea who we are. He is entirely useless. The illusion was completely dead. The high society wedding of the decade had officially devolved into a massive criminal scene. Suddenly, the phone was violently yanked away from my mother. I could hear the heavy rustling of silk fabric and the frantic, shallow breathing of someone having a total mental breakdown. It was Brittany. The golden child was no longer worried about her aesthetic. She was no longer screaming about her Instagram followers or her ruined makeup. The reality of being handcuffed in her custom designer wedding dress had finally shattered her massive ego. She was crying so hard she was choking on her own tears. The glamorous influencer who had banished me from her perfect day was now reduced to a terrified child begging for my protection. Nat! Brittany gasped out, her voice high and breathless. She had not called me by my childhood nickname in over a decade. Nat, I am so sorry. I am so incredibly sorry for everything I said. I stood in my quiet kitchen, listening to my sister frantically bargain for her freedom. Please, Nat, just make the call. I will annul the marriage with Jamal tomorrow morning. I swear to you I will leave him. I will delete my social media accounts. I will pay you back every single penny if I have to work minimum wage for the rest of my life. I will do anything you want. Just call the bank so we do not go to Italian prison. I let Brittany's frantic sobbing echo through my quiet kitchen for a few moments. She was hyperventilating, repeating my name over and over again, making wild promises she could never keep. But I was not interested in my sister's sudden change of heart. Her apologies were completely worthless, born only out of the immediate threat of a foreign jail cell. Put Dad back on the phone, I said, my voice slicing through her hysteria like a cold blade. There was a brief, chaotic shuffle on the other end. I heard my mother urging my father to take the phone, telling him to do whatever I asked. When Richard finally spoke, his voice was completely devoid of its usual arrogant thunder. It was a weak, trembling rasp. I am here, Natalie, he whispered, sounding like a thoroughly broken man. Please just tell me what I need to do. I will do anything. I sat down at my kitchen island and opened a new tab on my laptop. I launched the encrypted call recording software I used for conducting remote forensic interviews with corporate whistleblowers. I watched the green audio wave activate on my screen, ensuring it was picking up the transatlantic audio feed with crystal clear precision. If you want me to even consider calling the bank, Richard, I need you to do exactly as I say, I instructed, keeping my tone clinically detached. Put me on speakerphone right now. I heard the dull click of the phone being switched to speaker. I am on speaker. Richard confirmed, his breathing heavy and ragged. We are all listening. Good, I said. Now, before I make any calls to any financial institutions to clear this massive debt, I need to understand exactly how we got into this situation. I need you to tell me exactly how a $350,000 charge ended up on a credit card tied to my accounting firm. And I need you to be incredibly specific, Dad. No vague excuses. No deflecting blame. Richard hesitated. The silence stretched for a few agonizing seconds. He was a man who had spent his entire life avoiding accountability, dodging taxes, and hiding behind layers of deceit. Telling the unvarnished truth was entirely unnatural to him. Do it, Richard, Cynthia hissed aggressively in the background. She is giving us a way out. Just apologize to her so she can make the call. The police are bringing out the zip ties. Richard swallowed hard, the sound amplifying over the speaker. Okay, he gasped. Okay. I will tell you everything. Just please prepare to dial the bank. I watched the green recording wave spike on my monitor. Go ahead, I commanded. I applied for a high-yield corporate credit card 2 weeks ago. Richard began, his voice shaking violently. The venue manager here in Italy demanded a final upfront payment, and Jamal's funds were allegedly delayed. We did not have the cash flow. So I went online to Chase Bank. And whose information did you use to fill out that application? I prompted, refusing to let him gloss over the crime. I used your information, Natalie. He confessed, a pathetic sob breaking his sentence in half. I used your full legal name. I used your home address in California. I listed your forensic accounting firm as the primary business entity. I leaned closer to my laptop screen, watching the audio file capture every single damning syllable. And how exactly did you bypass the federal identity verification process, Richard? I memorized your social security number years ago, he admitted, his voice dropping to a shameful whisper. When you were applying for your first college apartment, I kept a copy of your tax documents. I typed your social security number into the bank application. I checked the box, claiming I was the authorized business owner. I forged your digital signature. So you intentionally committed identity theft and federal wire fraud, I stated clearly, ensuring the legal terminology was perfectly established on the recording. You stole my social security number to illegally obtain a massive line of credit that you never intended to pay back. Is that entirely correct? Yes, Richard wept loudly, openly crying over the speakerphone. Yes, I did it. Yes, I committed identity theft. I committed fraud. I was desperate to give Brittany her dream wedding, and I was too proud to admit I was broke. I am so sorry, Natalie. I am so incredibly sorry. I was a terrible father. I was greedy and selfish. Please forgive me. Please just call the bank and save us. I promise I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Cynthia and Brittany immediately chimed in, their voices overlapping in a chaotic chorus of desperate apologies. They were praising my intelligence, calling me the savior of the family, and promising that things would be completely different from now on. They genuinely believed that this humiliating public confession was the final toll they had to pay. They thought I was just a bitter daughter extracting a pound of flesh before swooping in to rescue them like I always did. I reached out and clicked the save button on my recording software. A small notification popped up on my screen, confirming the encrypted audio file was successfully stored and ready for export. I had every single crystal clear second of his confession. I had the absolute undeniable proof I needed to completely destroy them. I stared at the saved audio file on my desktop for a moment, letting the reality of my victory wash over me. The recording was safely backed up to 2 separate encrypted cloud servers. My father had just handed me the loaded gun, and I was entirely prepared to pull the trigger. On the phone, the chaotic symphony of the Italian palace was reaching an absolute crescendo. The venue manager was no longer negotiating. The 10-minute grace period had officially expired. I could hear the distinct authoritative voice of a senior police officer cutting through the noise. He was speaking in rapid Italian, followed immediately by a heavily accented English translation. You are under arrest for fraud against the state and theft of services. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Wait, you cannot do this, Richard screamed. The sound of a brief physical struggle echoed through the speaker, followed by my father grunting in pain as his arms were forcibly wrenched behind his back. I am an American citizen. I demand to speak to the consulate. You will speak to the magistrate, the officer replied coldly. The heavy metallic click of handcuffs snapping shut was incredibly loud. Then a new wave of commotion erupted near the back of the venue. A woman shrieked, and I heard the heavy thud of footsteps running across the marble floor. It was followed by the sound of someone crashing violently into a table of expensive champagne flutes. The glass shattered into 1,000 pieces. Get off me! A panicked, high-pitched voice yelled. It was Jamal. He is trying to run! Cynthia screamed, her voice cracking with pure disbelief. Jamal is running away. The so-called tech billionaire, the man who had promised my sister the world and bragged about his massive offshore liquidity pools, had decided to abandon his bride at the altar of their crimes. Realizing that the police were busy handcuffing my father, Jamal had tried to slip through the catering kitchen doors to escape into the Italian countryside. He did not care about Brittany. He did not care about the family that had just committed a federal felony to fund his lifestyle. He only cared about saving his own skin. But his cowardly escape was incredibly short-lived. The private security guards hired by the palace had completely surrounded the perimeter. "Let me go." Jamal whined, his voice muffled as he was slammed into the stone wall by two burly security guards. "I have nothing to do with these people. I am just a guest. I do not even know them." "He just said he does not know me," Brittany wailed, the absolute betrayal completely shattering her fragile reality. "Jamal, how could you say that? We just got married." "Shut up, Brittany." Jamal snapped back, his fake alpha male persona entirely dissolved into pathetic desperation. "I am not going to an Italian prison because your stupid family cannot pay a venue bill. Tell them I am not involved." The sheer audacity of his betrayal was almost poetic. My parents had sacrificed their dignity, their financial security, and my future to appease this man, and he was actively throwing them under the bus the second the illusion collapsed. They had chosen a grifter over their own daughter. Natalie Cynthia screamed into the phone, her voice a raw, bleeding throat sound of pure terror. She had completely abandoned any pretense of pride or control. The police officers were moving toward her and Brittany. She could see the zip ties in their hands. "Natalie, they are taking us!" Cynthia cried, the sound of her frantic breathing filling my kitchen. "They are taking Richard to the police car. They are grabbing my wrists. Please, you have the recording. You have his apology. I am begging you, as your mother, make the call. Tell the bank the card is authorized. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. You are our only hope. If you do not call right now, we are going to be locked in a foreign cell tonight." I listened to her desperate pleas. I listened to Brittany sobbing as the officers began to read her rights. I listened to my father shouting useless threats at the Italian authorities. For 34 years, I had been the family scapegoat. I had been the punching bag, the ATM, and the afterthought. They had expected me to absorb their abuse and fix their messes until the day I died. I picked up my phone, holding the speaker close to my mouth. The cool California night air drifted in through my open window, contrasting perfectly with the blazing inferno I was listening to in Italy. "Okay, Mom," I said, my voice perfectly calm and devoid of any emotion. "I will make the call." "Oh, thank God," Cynthia sobbed violently. "Thank you, Natalie. Thank you." I pressed the red button on my screen and hung up the phone. The line went completely dead. The chaotic noise of the royal palace was instantly cut off, leaving my apartment in total, absolute silence. The silence that filled my apartment was absolute and profound. For the first time in my entire life, the constant deafening noise of my family's demands was completely gone. I stood in the center of my living room, holding my phone in my hand. The screen went black. There were no more frantic text messages popping up. There were no more hysterical voicemails threatening my future. The chaotic symphony of the Italian police, the shattering glass, and my mother's desperate sobbing had been severed with the simple press of a button. I did not immediately rush back to my computer. I did not pull up the Chase Bank portal. Instead, I placed my phone face down on the granite kitchen island. I turned my back to the glowing screen of my laptop where my father's recorded confession was safely stored. I walked over to my electric kettle and filled it with fresh water. I pressed the power switch and listened to the gentle hum as the water began to heat up. It was just past 3 in the morning now. Through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of my high-rise apartment, I could see the very first faint hints of dawn beginning to trace the edge of the Pacific Ocean. The deep pitch black of the night sky was slowly softening into a bruised purple. The city of San Francisco was still fast asleep below me, entirely unaware of the massive international drama unfolding thousands of miles away in a rented European palace. For years, whenever my family manufactured a crisis, my body would instantly go into a state of severe physiological panic. My heart would race, my palms would sweat, and my stomach would tie itself into agonizing knots. I was conditioned to absorb their stress as if it were my own. If Brittany overdrew her checking account, I felt the panic. If my father made a bad investment, I lost sleep trying to restructure his debt. They had installed a panic button in my brain and they pressed it whenever they needed a bailout. But standing there watching the water boil, I realized the button was completely broken. My heart rate was slow and steady. My breathing was deep and rhythmic. I felt absolutely no urgency to save them from the Italian authorities. They had dug a massive grave with their own arrogance and greed, and I was perfectly content to let them lie in it. The kettle clicked off. I pulled a small ceramic bowl from my cupboard and measured out a perfect scoop of bright green matcha powder. I poured the hot water over the fine powder and picked up my bamboo whisk. I took my time. I whisked the tea in slow, deliberate zigzag motions, watching the bright green foam rise to the surface. It was a meticulous, grounding morning ritual that I usually reserved for quiet Sundays. Today it felt like a celebration. I brought the warm ceramic bowl to my lips and took a slow sip. The earthy, bitter taste grounded me completely in the present moment. I carried my tea over to the window and watched the horizon. The bruised purple sky was giving way to brilliant streaks of gold and orange. The sun was officially rising over the coast, washing away the darkness. It felt incredibly poetic. My old life, the one where I was the terrified, obedient scapegoat, was permanently over. A completely new reality was dawning. I finished my tea in absolute silence, allowing the warmth to spread through my chest. I walked back to the kitchen sink, rinsed the ceramic bowl, and dried my hands on a fresh linen towel. I felt completely rejuvenated. The heavy, suffocating weight I had carried on my shoulders for 34 years had completely vanished. I was no longer the frightened little girl taking out student loans to fund a sweet 16 party. I was a highly successful professional who had just successfully secured her own financial perimeter against a family of predators. I walked back over to the kitchen island. I picked up my phone and unlocked the screen. The device was still quiet. My family was likely sitting in the back of an Italian police cruiser right now, eagerly waiting for their bank accounts to magically unlock. They were probably assuring the foreign officers that a massive corporate wire transfer was only seconds away. They genuinely believed I had surrendered to their guilt trip. I opened the phone application and pulled up the keypad. I did not open my contacts list. I did not search for the standard 1-800 customer service number for Chase Bank. Calling a regular retail banking representative to report a $350,000 fraudulent charge would take hours of transferring between departments. It would give my father a window of opportunity to try and spin a lie or cancel the card himself to hide the evidence. I was not going to give him a single second of breathing room. I bypassed the standard banking numbers entirely and dialed a direct federal priority line instead. A crisp, professional voice answered. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Economic Crimes Division, Agent Miller speaking. It was the sharp, authoritative tone of federal law enforcement. I did not hesitate. Good morning, Agent Miller, I said, keeping my voice perfectly steady. My name is Natalie. I am a licensed forensic accountant in California. I am calling to report an active case of aggravated identity theft and international wire fraud involving a sum of $350,000. Hearing a forensic accountant report a six-figure wire fraud triggered an instant escalation. Go ahead, Natalie, Agent Miller instructed. What is the nature of the breach? Less than 48 hours ago, an unauthorized business credit account was opened in my name and tethered to my corporate accounting firm, I explained. The perpetrators utilized my social security number to bypass digital security protocols. They attempted to process a $350,000 international charge at a commercial venue located in Lake Como, Italy. The bank flagged the transaction and froze the account, but the perpetrators are currently at the venue attempting to force the authorization. Who are the perpetrators? Agent Miller asked. They are American citizens currently on foreign soil, I replied. Richard and Cynthia. They are my parents. There was a brief pause on the line, but federal agents do not deal in family sentiment. They deal in facts. I need their full legal names, dates of birth, and their last known permanent address, Agent Miller stated. I provided every single piece of information without a single flinch. I gave the agent their full legal names. I gave him the address of the Newport Beach house that I legally owned. I even provided the passport numbers I had forced them to send me months ago when they initially tried to make me book their flights. I handed over a complete, perfectly wrapped dossier of their criminal activity. I am generating the formal incident report now, Agent Miller confirmed. Because this involves international wire fraud and identity theft crossing federal borders, we will flag their passports. If they attempt to re-enter the United States, they will be detained by Customs and Border Protection. Do you have any supporting evidence of the identity theft? I have a crystal clear audio recording of Richard explicitly confessing to stealing my social security number and forging my digital signature, I told him. I also have the original metadata showing the location where the credit application was submitted. Agent Miller gave me a secure federal portal address. Upload the evidence immediately, he instructed. We will coordinate with the bank to ensure the liability is completely severed from your professional profile. I thanked him and ended the call. The federal machinery was officially in motion. There was no going back. Next, I dialed the direct internal line for the Fraud Investigation Division at Chase Bank. Because of my profession, I had the direct contact information for their senior risk analysts. I bypassed the automated menus and spoke directly to a fraud director named Sarah. I referenced the federal case number I had just received from Agent Miller. Sarah pulled up the frozen account. I can confirm the credit application was submitted online 2 days ago. She said, her voice highly professional. Because you have filed a federal report and provided a sworn statement, we are officially classifying this as a verified malicious breach. The $350,000 balance is permanently declined. We are locking the compromised social security number and placing a hard fraud alert on your entire credit profile. So I am completely cleared of any financial liability, I asked, ensuring the safety of my firm. Absolutely, Sarah confirmed. The bank assumes the risk during the investigation. We will pursue the individuals who filed the fraudulent application directly. Your perfect credit score will not be impacted. I thanked Sarah and hung up the phone. I opened my laptop and navigated to the secure federal database link Agent Miller had provided. The screen was stark white with a massive government seal in the center. I filled out the digital submission form, typing my federal case number. I opened my folder and found the audio file containing my father's weeping confession. I dragged the file into the upload box. The screen displayed a green loading bar, reaching 100% in seconds. A confirmation message popped up on the screen stating the evidence was successfully submitted. For decades, my family had operated under the delusion that they were entirely above the law. They believed their social status would always protect them. They thought they could commit a felony and gaslight their way out by using family as a shield. But the government only cared about evidence, and I had uploaded the ultimate proof. But my work was not entirely finished. As a forensic accountant, I knew that catching the perpetrator was only the first step. The second and most crucial step was securing the financial perimeter so tightly that absolutely no collateral damage could slip through the cracks. My parents were cornered animals, and I knew from professional experience that desperate people often try to open secondary credit lines when their primary scam fails. I was not going to give them a single inch of breathing room. I opened 3 secure tabs on my browser connecting directly to the major credit bureaus: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Using my corporate credentials, I initiated a hard global security freeze on my social security number. This was not a temporary lock. This was a permanent administrative freeze. It meant that no commercial entity could open a new line of credit request, a personal loan, or even run a basic background check using my identity without a multi-factor authentication code sent directly to my encrypted device. I went further. I logged into my personal checking and savings accounts and immediately initiated wire transfers, moving all of my liquid cash into a secondary high-yield account with a completely different banking institution. I revoked every legacy authorization linked to my name. I severed every digital tie that could remotely connect my personal wealth to the toxic sinkhole my family had created. Once my personal assets were secured inside an impenetrable digital fortress, I refreshed the Chase Bank administrative portal. Because I had escalated the issue directly through their senior fraud division, my dashboard had live updates. I sat back and watched the status of the $350,000 charge change in real time. 10 minutes ago, the overseas charge was listed under a yellow tag that read, "Pending Civil Dispute." In the American banking system, a civil dispute meant the institution still considered me a potential party to the debt pending further review. It meant they could still hold my business accountable if they decided the fraud claim was weak. But thanks to the recorded confession and the federal incident report, the automated system updated before my eyes. The yellow text vanished from the screen. In its place, a bold red notification appeared. Criminal fraud confirmed and liability transferred to initiating party. I let out a long, slow breath. That sentence was everything. It was the ultimate legal absolution. It meant the massive corporate legal department at Chase Bank was officially pointing their crosshairs directly at Richard. The bank was no longer coming after me. They were not going to send aggressive collections agents to my apartment. They were not going to report a defaulted debt to the credit bureaus and destroy my perfect credit score. The debt had transformed from an unpaid venue bill into a federal criminal act owned entirely by my father. My phone buzzed against the granite countertop, vibrating loudly in the quiet kitchen. The caller ID displayed the same federal priority number I had dialed earlier. I answered immediately. "Agent Miller here," he said, his voice even sharper and more engaged than before. "I just finished reviewing the audio file you uploaded to our secure server. And is it sufficient for your investigation?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "It is more than sufficient, Natalie," he replied, the sound of rapid typing echoing in the background. "You delivered a textbook confession. Your father explicitly admitted to forging your digital signature, stealing your social security number, and attempting to authorize a six-figure fraudulent wire transfer. The fraud director at the bank has officially synced their internal investigation with our federal file. The financial liability is entirely on him now. Your name is completely clear of this transaction." "That is exactly what I needed to hear," I said, feeling a massive physical weight permanently lift from my shoulders. "There is one logistical issue we need to address." Agent Miller continued, his tone shifting to strict tactical procedure. "I just ran the primary suspect through the Federal Flight Risk Database. According to commercial airline manifests, Richard and Cynthia boarded a flight out of Los Angeles International Airport 5 days ago. Are you aware the perpetrators are currently overseas?" I smiled, looking out the window at the bright morning sun reflecting off the calm waters of the Pacific Ocean. The contrast between my peace and their nightmare was incredibly satisfying. "Yes, Agent Miller, I am fully aware," I replied, my voice completely calm. "They are currently at a rented royal palace in Lake Como, Italy. And you do not need to worry about them fleeing the jurisdiction." "Why is that?" he asked. "Because," I replied, my smile widening, "they are currently speaking to the local authorities." I ended the call with Agent Miller and closed my laptop. The sun was now fully above the horizon, bathing my living room in bright, warm light. I felt a profound sense of tranquility. I walked into my bathroom and turned on the shower, letting the hot water wash away the lingering traces of the sleepless night. For the first time in years, I was not dreading the day ahead. I dressed in my favorite tailored suit, ready to head into the office and tackle my corporate accounts with a clear mind. Exactly 45 minutes had passed since I hung up the phone with my mother. I was in the kitchen pouring my matcha tea into a travel mug when my phone lit up on the granite counter. The screen displayed a long string of numbers indicating an incoming international call originating from Italy. My parents were incredibly persistent. I assumed my father had managed to beg, borrow, or steal a phone from one of the wedding guests for one last desperate attempt to guilt-trip me. I picked up the device and pressed the green accept button, ready to firmly reiterate my stance. "Hello," I said, my voice flat and completely detached. There was a brief moment of static, followed by the sound of a throat clearing. "Buongiorno," a deep, gravelly voice said. The voice did not belong to Richard. It was immediately followed by a second voice, a woman speaking in clear, precise English. "Good morning," she said. "Am I speaking with Miss Natalie?" "This is Natalie," I replied, setting my travel mug down. "Who is calling, please?" "I am calling on behalf of Captain Rossi of the Carabinieri, the Italian provincial police force," the female translator explained. "We are currently stationed at a private estate in Lake Como. Captain Rossi is the commanding officer on site, managing a severe financial dispute involving American citizens who claim to be your immediate family. The individuals in our custody are Richard, Cynthia, and Brittany. They have requested we contact you to resolve a matter regarding a declined commercial credit card." I leaned against the counter. "I am listening," I told her. Captain Rossi spoke rapidly in Italian in the background. The translator paused to listen before relaying his message. "The suspects are currently being detained for attempted theft of services and fraud against a local historical estate. The total uncompensated balance is $350,000 American dollars. The suspect, named Richard, has repeatedly stated to our officers that you are his daughter, and that you manage the business account associated with the declined payment." The translator took a short breath before continuing. "Richard claims this entire situation is simply a banking error and a tragic family misunderstanding. He insists that you are currently on the phone with your American financial institution, authorizing the release of the funds. He begged Captain Rossi to call you to confirm that the money is being wired so we can release them from custody. Captain Rossi needs your official verbal confirmation. Are you currently authorizing the payment for this venue?" I could picture the scene perfectly. My father was likely standing in the beautiful palace courtyard, handcuffed and sweating profusely, trying to use his final ounce of charisma to con a seasoned Italian police captain. He was still banking on the old family dynamic. He genuinely thought that when the foreign police called me, I would panic and protect the family name. He thought I would lie to the authorities to save him from public humiliation and a jail cell. "Tell Captain Rossi I appreciate him taking the time to call me directly," I said, my voice perfectly steady and clear. "But the suspect, named Richard, is lying to him." The translator relayed my words to the captain. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end, followed by a low murmur in Italian. I could hear the faint sound of my mother wailing in the distance, completely unaware that her fate was being sealed across the ocean. "Please translate my next words exactly as I say them," I instructed. "Do not omit a single detail." "I am ready." The translator replied, her tone shifting to strict professional attention. "I am not authorizing any payments," I stated, enunciating every syllable. "The credit card used at your venue was opened fraudulently. Richard stole my social security number and forged my digital signature to obtain that line of credit. I have already contacted my bank and the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation. There is an active federal incident report filed in America right now regarding his criminal actions. Please inform Captain Rossi that I am the victim of identity theft. I authorize nothing. Press full charges. Let them face your law." The translator conveyed my exact words to Captain Rossi in rapid Italian. I kept the phone pressed tightly to my ear, listening to the immediate fallout. Through the open line, I heard the captain let out a sharp, authoritative bark. His tone had completely shifted from cautious investigation to absolute enforcement. The brief window of diplomatic negotiation was officially slammed shut. There was a sudden flurry of movement on the other end. The heavy boots of the carabinieri scuffed aggressively against the marble courtyard. Then came the unmistakable sound of Richard shouting in pure disbelief. "Wait! What did she say?" Richard demanded, his voice echoing wildly. "What do you mean the card is fraudulent?" I told you she's on the phone clearing it right now. Let me speak to her. Let me speak to my daughter. No more talking. The translator's voice cut through the chaos, speaking directly into the phone receiver, but projecting loud enough for my family to hear. The American bank has confirmed the criminal fraud. The United States federal authorities have been notified. You are all under formal arrest. The beautiful chaos erupted instantly. The heavy metallic ratcheting of handcuffs being forcefully closed echoed through the speaker. Richard began to struggle, screaming at the top of his lungs. "You cannot do this to me!" He bellowed, his voice cracking with sheer panic and outrage. "I am an American citizen. I demand to speak to the United States consulate immediately. You are making a massive mistake. I am a wealthy businessman. I will sue this entire province." The Italian officers were completely unimpressed by his threats. A firm voice ordered him to stop resisting in heavily accented English, followed by the sound of Richard being physically shoved forward. He stumbled, his expensive leather shoes scraping against the ancient stone pathways of the palace. Then my mother started to wail. It was not her usual theatrical crying designed to manipulate a situation. It was a raw, guttural sound of absolute terror. Cynthia was screaming for somebody to help her, begging the remaining wedding guests to pool their cash together to pay the venue manager. But the wealthy socialites they had invited were completely silent. The people she had spent decades trying to impress were now backing away, holding their expensive cocktails, watching the family matriarch get hauled away. Nobody was stepping forward to drop $350,000 for a family currently being handcuffed for international wire fraud. I could hear the sharp scuffle as an officer grabbed Cynthia by the arms, forcing her wrists behind her back. Brittany was having a complete mental breakdown. The glamorous influencer wedding she had meticulously planned to boost her social media metrics had morphed into a high-profile criminal arrest. "Do not touch me!" she shrieked, her voice pitching into a hysterical frequency. "This is custom silk. You are ruining my dress. My designer gown is dragging in the gravel. Stop pulling me." I did not do anything. It was my dad. My dad stole the credit card. I am just the bride. Her desperate attempt to throw our father under the bus to save her custom gown was perfectly on brand. I listened as the heavy metal door of an Italian police cruiser slid open. Brittany let out a final breathless sob as she was physically pushed into the back seat of the squad car, her heavy silk dress bunching up and tearing against the doorframe. The door slammed shut with a heavy finality, cutting off her screams from the open courtyard. The venue was rapidly emptying of my family members, but the grand finale was just beginning. Through the static of the phone connection, I heard the distinct sound of Jamal trying to negotiate his way out of the disaster. He had already tried to run and failed. Now he was pivoting to a completely new and incredibly absurd legal strategy. "Do not put those restraints on me," Jamal shouted, his voice dripping with forced bravado. "I do not consent to this interaction. I am a sovereign individual acting under international maritime law. You have no jurisdiction over my physical person. I am claiming full diplomatic immunity as an autonomous foreign national." I actually pulled the phone away from my ear for a second, staring at it in pure disbelief. Jamal, the bankrupt dropshipper from Nevada, was trying to use a sovereign citizen defense against the Italian military police. It was a desperate, ridiculous tactic he had likely watched on a late-night internet video. The Carabinieri did not find his legal theories amusing. The Italian officers do not entertain sovereign citizen nonsense. I heard the sharp sound of a heavy baton being drawn, followed by a swift physical takedown. Jamal let out a loud, pained grunt as he was violently swept off his feet and pinned face first into the gravel driveway. "You do not have immunity," a thick Italian voice growled over the sound of Jamal struggling. "You have the right to remain silent." The sharp click of the handcuffs securing Jamal's wrists sounded like music to my ears. The grifter who had destroyed my sister's life and convinced my parents to commit a federal felony was finally eating dirt in a rented tuxedo. Even with his face pressed into the Italian gravel, Jamal was still shouting about maritime law. But my father had completely tuned him out. Seeing his wealthy son-in-law, easily subdued by local law enforcement, finally shattered Richard's last delusion. There was no secret billionaire coming to save them. He was entirely on his own. I listened intently as the chaotic audio shifted. Richard stopped fighting the officers holding his arms. He stood up straight, trying to project an air of wealthy American authority despite the metal cuffs digging into his wrists. "I demand my phone call," he shouted, his voice echoing across the stone courtyard. "Under international law, I have the absolute right to contact the United States Embassy. Get me the consular officer on duty right now. You are going to regret ever putting your hands on me." The Italian captain did not look intimidated. He nodded to one of his officers, who pulled a heavy police-issued mobile phone from his tactical vest. The officer dialed the emergency consular line for American citizens and held the phone up to Richard's ear. The translator, who was still holding the phone connected to me, stepped closer so I could hear every single word of my father's final desperate play. A crisp, professional voice answered the line, identifying himself as an emergency services officer for the United States Consulate in Milan. "Thank God," Richard gasped, his tone immediately shifting to that of an outraged victim. "Listen to me very carefully. My name is Richard. I am a prominent American citizen and a wealthy taxpayer. I am currently being illegally detained by local police at a private estate in Lake Como over a simple misunderstanding regarding a commercial credit card. They are treating my family like common criminals. I need you to dispatch a diplomatic representative down here immediately. I need you to arrange our release and provide a legal liaison to sue this police department." I listened from the quiet comfort of my kitchen, sipping my matcha tea. Richard was so incredibly accustomed to his white-collar privilege. He genuinely believed that his American passport was a magic shield that allowed him to behave recklessly in foreign countries without facing any consequences. The consular officer remained entirely neutral. "I understand you are distressed, sir. Please provide your full legal name and your passport number so I can locate your profile in our system and verify your status." Richard rattled off his passport number from memory, his voice dripping with arrogant impatience. "Check the system," he demanded. "You will see I have a pristine travel record. I want these handcuffs off in the next 5 minutes." There was a long, heavy pause on the line. I could hear the faint sound of a keyboard clacking as the consular officer typed the numbers into the federal database. The silence stretched on, feeling like an eternity in the cold Italian night. When the officer finally spoke, his voice had lost all of its customer service warmth. It was completely flat and strictly bureaucratic. "Sir, I have located your file," the officer stated. "And unfortunately, the United States Embassy will not be dispatching a representative to assist you tonight. Furthermore, we cannot provide you with any diplomatic bail assistance." "What are you talking about?" Richard barked, his face likely turning a dangerous shade of red. "It is your literal job to protect American citizens abroad. It is our job to protect citizens who are not actively fleeing federal prosecution," the officer corrected him sharply. "I am looking at a priority alert placed on your passport by the Federal Bureau of Investigation less than 20 minutes ago. You are currently flagged for aggravated identity theft and international wire fraud. Because you committed these alleged crimes against an American financial institution while on foreign soil, you are classified as an extreme flight risk." Richard let out a choked, gasping sound. He could not comprehend what he was hearing. "The federal government has revoked your consular privileges," the officer continued, delivering the final crushing blow. "The Italian authorities have full jurisdiction to process you under their penal code. You will be facing massive local fines for theft of services, and you will be placed in temporary detention at their provincial jail. Once your local sentences are served, you will be immediately deported back to the United States into federal custody. I suggest you cooperate fully with the Carabinieri. Good luck, sir." The line clicked dead. The consular officer hung up. The final safety net had completely evaporated. They were officially trapped in a foreign legal system, facing crushing fines, a terrifying language barrier, and the absolute certainty of a jail cell. My mother let out a shrill, ear-piercing scream of pure despair, realizing that her luxury Italian vacation was ending behind iron bars. The Italian captain gestured to the translator to wrap up the call. Before the translator could pull the phone away, Richard leaned forward, his face inches from the microphone. He knew exactly who had orchestrated his complete destruction. "You are dead to us, Natalie," he screamed, his voice tearing through his throat with violent, unhinged fury. "Dead." The word dead echoed through the speaker, followed immediately by the sharp, violent click of the phone being confiscated. The line went completely silent. There was no dial tone on modern cellular networks, but the absolute void of sound felt just as final. I stood alone in my kitchen, holding the quiet device in my hand. I looked down at the dark screen. "I was dead to you the moment I stopped being your automated teller machine," I said, my voice steady and echoing lightly off the granite countertops. My father thought his words were the ultimate punishment. He genuinely believed that banishing me from the family kingdom would leave me shattered and weeping on my apartment floor. He did not understand that his rejection was not a punishment. It was a pardon. It was the exact key I needed to finally unlock the heavy iron collar they had kept around my neck for 34 years. I unlocked my phone and opened my contact list. I scrolled down to my father's name. Richard. I pressed the information icon and tapped block caller. A small red warning popped up asking if I was sure I wanted to stop receiving communications from this number. I tapped confirm. I moved to my mother's profile. Cynthia. Blocked. I found my sister's contact. Brittany. Blocked. I even found the temporary number Jamal had texted me from months ago when he was trying to solicit a fake investment. Blocked. I did not stop there. I opened my social media applications and systematically went through my privacy settings. I blocked all of their accounts. I blocked their secondary business profiles. I blocked my extended relatives who I knew would inevitably act as flying monkeys the moment the gossip hit California. I completely severed the digital arteries that connected my peaceful life to their toxic drama. I even logged into my cellular provider portal and enabled a strict filter against all incoming international calls. If they managed to bribe a guard for a phone call, they were going to be greeted by an automated network error. I set the phone down feeling lighter than I had ever felt in my entire life. The sun was fully up now, casting long golden shadows across my hardwood floors. It was going to be a beautiful day in San Francisco. I walked into my bedroom and opened my closet. Today was not a day for casual office wear. Today required armor. I bypassed the standard cardigans and reached for a sharply tailored navy blue suit. It was a designer piece I had bought for myself after securing my first major corporate promotion. I paired it with a crisp white silk blouse and my favorite black leather heels. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, applying my makeup with a steady hand. My eyes were clear. My skin looked bright. There were no dark circles from crying. There was no trembling lower lip. I was stepping into the most powerful version of myself. For years, they had called me a boring numbers girl, a spinster, a glorified calculator. They mocked my practical life while building their entire identities on a mountain of high-interest debt and social media lies. Now the truth was laid bare. The glamorous influencer bride was sitting in a holding cell with a ruined silk dress. The arrogant tech billionaire was facing international fraud charges. The wealthy country club parents were stripped of their passports and their dignity, and the boring numbers girl was standing in a luxury high-rise apartment with a perfect credit score, completely immune to their destruction. I finished my hair and grabbed my leather briefcase from the entryway table. Inside were the financial reports for a major corporate merger I was overseeing today. While my family was busy begging a foreign magistrate for leniency, I was going to walk into a glass boardroom and dictate the financial future of a multi-million-dollar company. I opened my front door and stepped out into the hallway, locking the deadbolt behind me. I pressed the button for the elevator and waited, listening to the soft mechanical hum of the building. The elevator doors slid open, revealing the polished, mirrored interior. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the lobby. As the elevator descended, I made a mental checklist for the week. I needed to finish the merger audit. I needed to pick up my dry cleaning. And I needed to contact my property management firm to formally initiate the eviction protocol for the Newport Beach house. My parents were not going to be living there when they eventually faced deportation back to the United States. They had burned their last bridge, and I was going to make sure the ashes were completely swept away before they even landed on American soil. I walked out of the building and into the bright California morning completely free. 3 weeks passed since that defining morning in my apartment. During those 21 days, my family learned exactly how unforgiving the real world could be without my financial safety net. According to the updates I received from Agent Miller, Richard was forced to make the most painful financial decision of his entire life. To avoid serving a lengthy criminal sentence in an Italian provincial prison, he had to completely liquidate his remaining retirement accounts. He paid the $350,000 venue bill in cash, plus an additional $50,000 in legal fees and local fines. The massive early withdrawal carried severe tax penalties, effectively wiping out the absolute last remaining dollars he possessed. They were financially ruined before they even boarded their flight back to America. The Italian government did not let them finish their glamorous vacation. They were formally deported, their passports permanently stamped with criminal bans preventing them from ever returning to the European Union. When their commercial flight finally touched down at Los Angeles International Airport, they were entirely exhausted, humiliated, and broken. But their nightmare was only just beginning. Because I had filed the federal report and provided the undeniable audio confession, the American authorities were eagerly waiting for their arrival. The moment the plane doors opened, Customs and Border Protection officers boarded the aircraft. They did not even let my family step out into the terminal. Right there in the narrow aisle of the airplane, in front of hundreds of staring passengers, holding up their cell phones to record the scene, federal agents placed my father in handcuffs. Richard did not shout about his rights or demand to speak to an attorney this time. The crushing reality of federal wire fraud and aggravated identity theft had finally broken his arrogant spirit. He kept his head down as he was quietly escorted off the plane and transferred directly into the custody of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. But Richard was not the only one leaving the airport in the back of a law enforcement vehicle. The authorities had run a routine scan on all deported passengers, and the federal system immediately flagged my brilliant tech billionaire brother-in-law. Jamal had a massive outstanding federal warrant stemming from his Chapter 7 bankruptcy fraud and multiple serious violations of his court-mandated financial restrictions. 2 large officers grabbed Jamal by the arms the second he stepped off the jet bridge. He tried to spin one last pathetic lie, claiming it was a clerical error and referencing his imaginary legal team, but the officers simply confiscated his fake luxury watch, read him his rights, and dragged him away toward a holding cell. That left Cynthia and Brittany standing completely alone in the massive international terminal. The golden child and the family matriarch were entirely stripped of their male protectors, their manufactured wealth, and their social standing. Brittany was wearing a pair of stained sweatpants she had purchased at the Italian airport gift shop, completely unrecognizable from the glamorous influencer who had demanded a royal wedding just weeks prior. Cynthia was physically trembling, clutching her expensive designer purse, which was now filled with nothing but worthless maxed-out credit cards and Italian legal documents she could not even comprehend. They had absolutely no one to call for help. They could not call me because their numbers were permanently blocked on my end. They could not call their wealthy country club friends because the gossip had already spread through their social circles in California like wildfire. Everyone knew Richard had been arrested overseas, and nobody wanted to be associated with a family facing federal indictments. So Cynthia did the only thing she could think of. She pulled out her phone and ordered a standard Uber using the absolute last few dollars available on her personal debit card. They loaded their heavy suitcases into the trunk of the basic sedan, completely silent. During the hour-long drive down the Pacific Coast Highway, they stared blankly out the windows. They were headed straight for the Newport Beach house. In their delusional minds, they still genuinely believed they had a $2 million coastal sanctuary waiting for them. They thought they could just unlock the front door, walk into their massive kitchen, sleep in their expensive plush beds, and figure out a way to manipulate their way out of this disaster in the morning. They were expecting at least a comfortable, familiar place to rest their heads. The dark Uber pulled into the pristine, quiet, wealthy neighborhood of Newport Beach. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. For Cynthia and Brittany, the familiar sight of the coastal homes should have been a comforting embrace. They dragged their heavy luggage onto the concrete sidewalk. The Uber sped away, leaving them standing entirely alone in the quiet evening air. Cynthia let out a long, exhausted sigh. She did not look at the driveway or the side of the house. She was completely hyper-focused on getting inside and collapsing onto her mattress. She marched up the walkway with Brittany trailing sluggishly behind her. When Cynthia reached the front door, she dug into her purse and pulled out her heavy keyring. She found the brass house key and slid it into the deadbolt. She turned her wrist, but the key refused to budge. It did not even catch the internal mechanism. She pulled it out, frowned, and tried again, pushing harder. It was completely jammed. "What is wrong with the door?" Brittany complained, her voice whining and nasal from exhaustion. "Just open it, Mom. I need to take a shower. I smell like an Italian jail cell." "I am trying," Cynthia snapped, rattling the heavy door handle. "The lock is completely stuck." She reached up to the digital smart lock pad mounted above the handle. She typed in her personal 4-digit code. The keypad flashed a bright, angry red light and emitted a sharp, negative beep. She typed it again, slower this time. Red light. Negative beep. The system had been wiped and reprogrammed. "That is impossible," Cynthia muttered, her voice laced with rising panic. She took a step back from the door, and that is when she finally looked up. Taped dead center at eye level on the beautiful stained wood was a thick packet of bright white legal documents enclosed in a clear plastic sleeve. The bold black letters at the very top of the first page were impossible to miss. Notice of eviction. Cynthia froze. Her hands began to tremble violently as she reached up and pulled the packet from the door. She stared at the dense legal text, her eyes darting back and forth across the page. It was a formal court-ordered eviction mandate. It explicitly stated that the month-to-month tenants, Richard and Cynthia, had failed to pay their required rent and had defaulted on their lease agreement. The property was officially reclaimed by the company. "What does it say?" Brittany asked, dropping the handle of her suitcase. "Mom, what is that?" Cynthia could not speak. She flipped to the second page of the packet and let out a sharp gasp. It was not just an eviction notice. Attached directly behind it was a temporary restraining order. It legally barred Richard, Cynthia, and Brittany from coming within 500 feet of Natalie, her primary residence, or any commercial properties owned by her corporation, including the Newport Beach house. "We are trespassing," Cynthia whispered, her voice completely hollow. "She legally evicted us while we were in Italy. She got a judge to sign a restraining order. If any of the neighbors call the police right now, we will be arrested again." Brittany snatched the papers from her mother's shaking hands. Her eyes widened as she read the absolute finality of the court order. "She cannot do this!" Brittany shrieked, her voice echoing loudly. "This is our house. All of my clothes are inside, all of my expensive bags and my shoes and my jewelry. Where are we supposed to go? We do not have any money." Cynthia slumped against the heavy wooden door, completely defeated. The reality of their situation was absolute. They had no money. They had no husband or son-in-law to bail them out. They had no home. And the daughter they had abused and exploited for decades had legally locked them out of their own lives. "Mom," Brittany gasped, her voice suddenly dropping to a terrified whisper. Cynthia slowly opened her eyes and followed her daughter's pointing finger. Earlier, they had been so focused on reaching the front door that they had completely ignored the far side of the massive 3-car garage. Stacked neatly against the stucco wall, entirely exposed to the coastal evening air, was a massive pile of cheap, brown cardboard boxes. They were not luxury moving crates. They were basic, generic boxes sealed with heavy packing tape. Stacked on top of the boxes were several heavy black trash bags filled to the brim. Every single piece of designer clothing, every expensive pair of shoes, every piece of jewelry, and every personal item they had ever owned had been meticulously packed up and left out on the driveway like common garbage. Instead of accepting the reality of their situation, Brittany resorted to the only survival tactic she actually knew. She pulled her phone out of her pocket and immediately opened her social media applications. She was going to spin a massive public relations campaign. She sat down heavily on one of the cardboard boxes on the driveway, ensuring the eviction notice and the locked door were clearly visible in the background of her camera frame. She hit the live broadcast button, broadcasting to her hundreds of thousands of followers. The tears began to flow instantly. It was a perfectly executed performance of a helpless victim. She sobbed into the camera lens, wiping her eyes and telling a completely fabricated story to her audience. She claimed that I was a deeply unstable and violently jealous older sister. She told her followers that I had hijacked the family finances while she was overseas getting married and illegally evicted our elderly parents onto the street out of pure spite. She cried about her ruined wedding dress and begged her followers to send donations to a crowdfunding link she had just set up to help them secure a hotel room for the night. For about 20 minutes, her comment section was flooded with sympathy. Her devoted fans were outraged, demanding my name and my workplace so they could ruin my career. Brittany watched the donations slowly start to trickle in, feeling a brief surge of arrogant triumph. She thought she had successfully weaponized the internet against me, but the internet is an incredibly fast and unforgiving machine. While Brittany was sitting on a box crying about her evil sister, a major local news network in Los Angeles published a breaking story on their website. The headline was highly clickbait, but entirely accurate. Fake tech millionaire arrested at LAX after fleeing unpaid Italian royal wedding. The news article contained everything. It featured a high-resolution photograph of Jamal being led through the airport terminal in handcuffs, looking disheveled and terrified. It detailed his active federal warrants, his previous bankruptcy fraud, and the undeniable fact that he had absolutely zero assets to his name. The journalist had even managed to secure a quote from the Italian palace manager, confirming the venue had been scammed. Even worse, the article explicitly mentioned that the extravagant destination wedding had been funded by a stolen credit card, resulting in the bride's father being detained by federal authorities for identity theft on the exact same flight. It took exactly 4 minutes for the news article to reach Brittany's live broadcast. Someone pasted the link into her comment section. Then another person pasted it. Suddenly, the entire tone of her chat completely flipped. The supportive messages vanished instantly, replaced by a tidal wave of mockery and outrage. Her followers realized they were not watching a victim. They were watching a fraud who had married a wanted criminal and tried to scam them out of donation money. Brittany stared at her screen in absolute horror as the comments rolled in. People were laughing at her. They were calling her a grifter. The crowdfunding platform flagged her campaign for suspicious activity and froze the account before she could withdraw a single dollar. Then the corporate emails started hitting her inbox. The luxury champagne brand that had sponsored her reception sent a swift legal notice terminating her contract, effective immediately, citing a strict morality clause. The boutique travel agency that had supposedly booked her Maldives honeymoon released a statement confirming the reservations were never actually paid for. The bridal designer who had provided her custom silk dress publicly announced they were severing all ties and demanded the garment be returned or paid for in full. Within 2 hours, Brittany lost every single major sponsor she had spent years cultivating. Her follower count began dropping by the tens of thousands. Her entire influencer career, the very foundation of her inflated ego, was completely annihilated in a single evening. She abruptly ended the live broadcast, dropping her phone onto the concrete driveway. She buried her face in her hands and finally cried real, genuine tears of absolute defeat. The illusion was dead. and the entire world knew it. They spent the next several hours sitting on the cold driveway as the coastal fog rolled in. They had nowhere to go. The few family friends Cynthia tried to call completely ignored her. They were entirely toxic radioactive outcasts. Later that evening, as I was sitting in my living room reviewing a corporate audit file, a notification popped up on my phone. It was a new voicemail from an unregistered prepaid burner phone. I clicked play and held the device to my ear. It was my mother. Cynthia was no longer screaming or demanding. She was crying so hard she was practically hyperventilating. The sound of the chilly coastal wind whipped against the microphone. "Natalie," she sobbed, her voice weak and shivering. "Please pick up. We have no money. The police drove past the house twice, and we are terrified they are going to arrest us for trespassing. Please, I am begging you, just unlock the side door. We will not even come inside the main house. Just let us sleep in the garage tonight. Please, Natalie, please." I listened to the voicemail play out entirely. The sound of the chilly coastal wind whipping against my mother's burner phone painted a vivid picture of their current reality. They were sitting on a cold concrete driveway in Newport Beach, surrounded by cheap cardboard boxes, staring at a locked garage door. I sat in my plush leather chair inside my corner office on the 40th floor, overlooking the magnificent San Francisco Bay. The morning sun was reflecting off the water, casting a warm, brilliant glow across my mahogany desk. The contrast between our two lives had never been more absolute. My mother was begging for a patch of concrete to sleep on. For my entire life, I had been the one pushed into the emotional garage. I was the one told to take up less space, to ask for less, to sacrifice my own comfort, so my sister could have the master suite. They had conditioned me to believe that my only value was my ability to absorb their burdens. The voicemail finally beeped, indicating the end of the recording. The automated system asked if I wanted to save or delete the message. I did not hesitate. I pressed the delete button. Then I navigated to the deleted messages folder and permanently erased it from the server. I was not going to keep a digital souvenir of their misery. I was not going to let their desperate guilt trips take up a single kilobyte of space in my new life. I set the phone down and turned my attention back to the physical documents spread across my desk. They were printed on thick premium paper bearing the letterhead of the top luxury real estate brokerage in Southern California. It was the exclusive listing agreement for the Newport Beach property. The agent had run the recent market comparables and officially priced the home at $2.2 million. Because the housing inventory was incredibly low, she confidently predicted we would receive multiple all-cash offers above the asking price by the end of the weekend. I picked up my heavy silver pen. I methodically turned to the last page of the contract and signed my full legal name on the authorization line. The house was officially on the market. I already knew exactly what I was going to do with the massive influx of liquid equity. I was not going to buy a flashy sports car or rent a fake penthouse to impress strangers on the internet. I was going to use the capital to formally resign from my corporate job and open my own completely independent forensic accounting firm. I was going to hire my own staff, lease my own commercial office space, and choose my own high-net-worth clients. I was taking the power and the wealth my parents had tried to use against me and turning it into an unbreakable financial fortress. Society constantly pushes a deeply flawed narrative about family. We are told from a very young age that blood is thicker than water. We are told that we must forgive our parents for their cruelty simply because they gave us life. We are pressured to maintain relationships with toxic siblings because we happen to share the same genetics. But the truth I finally realized is that family is not defined by biology or a shared last name. True family is defined by mutual respect. It is defined by reciprocity, safety, and unconditional support. Cutting my parents and my sister out of my life was not an easy decision. It felt like undergoing surgery without anesthesia to remove a massive tumor. It was painful, terrifying, and deeply uncomfortable. There is a grieving process that happens when you finally accept that you will never have the loving, supportive family you always dreamed of. You have to mourn the parents you deserved but never received. but the absolute peace and health that follows the surgical removal of that toxic cancer is worth every single second of the pain. My life is no longer a constant chaotic cycle of financial emergencies and emotional manipulation. My money belongs to me. My time belongs to me. My future is entirely my own. I gathered the signed real estate documents and slid them neatly into a manila envelope. I closed my laptop, securing the latches on my leather briefcase. I walked out of my corner office, taking the elevator down to the main lobby of the high-rise building. I pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped out into the bright, beautiful California sun. The air felt incredibly crisp and clean. I took a deep breath, feeling completely and truly free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have ever had to make the difficult decision to cut toxic family members out of your life to protect your own peace, I want to hear from you. Let me know your experiences in the comments below. Do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about surviving family betrayal and finding your own independence. Remember that walking away from abuse is not a failure. It is the brave first step toward building the life you actually deserve. The story we just explored reveals a profound and often painful truth about human relationships. The most important lesson to take away is that shared DNA does not automatically entitle someone to your endless sacrifice. For too long, society has pushed the narrative that family is an unbreakable bond and that loyalty should be maintained even at the cost of your own mental and financial well-being. Natalie's journey perfectly illustrates the devastating danger of toxic loyalty. Her parents and sister manipulated her empathy and sense of duty, using guilt as a weapon to fund their endless delusions. They believed that because she was family, she was obligated to act as their permanent safety net, regardless of their constant emotional abuse. But true family is built on a solid foundation of mutual respect, safety, and reciprocal care. When those essential elements are replaced by exploitation and criminal deceit, the biological connection becomes nothing more than a tool for manipulation. Setting firm boundaries is never an act of cruelty. It is an act of profound self-preservation. Walking away from people who actively harm you requires immense courage, especially when those people are your own parents or siblings. It means grieving the loving family you deserved but never actually had. However, as Natalie discovered the exact moment you stop setting yourself on fire to keep toxic people warm, you finally give yourself the space to breathe, grow, and build a life of genuine peace. You do not owe your future to people who refuse to respect your present. Take a moment today to evaluate the relationships in your life and boldly establish the boundaries you need to protect your own peace.